Welcome to the Steering Change Podcast, navigating through the commercial transportation industry in Alberta and beyond, powered by the Alberta Motor Transport Association. Here's your host, Kelsey Hipkin.
Hello, listeners of Steering Change. It is I, Kelsey Hipkin. On September 10th, AMTA's regional meetings resumed after a summer hiatus. This was a virtual meeting with a presentation topic of More Than a Driver, putting professionalism back into the industry. This presentation included Jim Tench, AMTA 2025 Driver of the Year, Henry Wolf, former AMTA Road Knight and Fleet and Facilities Manager with Canada Transport, AMTA's own Doug Walton, and Kalina LeGoff, Manager, Safety and Compliance, Western Canada with Triline. Kalina is also the Vice Chair for AMTA's Compliance and Regulatory Affairs Committee, and she sits on our Education Committee. As is the way with technology, unfortunately, a recording of that meeting didn't work to our satisfaction, so we are going to be revisiting some of that content today. Kalina and Doug returned to join us on today's episode, and while Jim and Henry were unable to record with us today, such is the life of commercial drivers in this industry, we are including another gentleman I know who will well fit the bill of today's chat, AMTA's Cliff Litke, another Class 1 license holder. Kalina, Cliff, and Doug are going to cover driver supports and workplace culture, the importance of training and mentorship, longevity of the job, and more. Kalina, Cliff, Doug, welcome.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hey, Kelsey.
To start, let's get to know you a bit more. Kalina, can you tell us about the work that you do with Triline?
Hi, good afternoon. I am part of the senior leadership team at Triline Carriers. I lead a safety and compliance team, and I'm directly responsible for our pursuit of excellence in safety and compliance. And I work very closely with operations, finance, admin. I do proactive business activities such as trending, predicting, monitoring, and auditing. And reactive, I'm the lead for investigations into injuries, collisions, cargo claims, etc. I'm actively involved in the field doing site inspections, field observations, etc.
Wow, busy lady. And as we mentioned in the intro, Kalina is also very involved with AMTA. Robin and I were just joking. I've known her longer than a bunch of my colleagues here at the association. So thank you so much for joining us today. Mr. Litke, can you run us through your history as a driver that led you to where you are today?
Sure. Well, I'm third generation truck driver. My father and my grandfather were as well. Started in the industry itself when I was 18 years old. And when I was 22 is when I got my Class 1 and just went straight to work as a Class 1 driver at a regional carrier here in town, and worked there for about 10 years before I went back to school and got a business diploma and went into sales, but sales for trucking, and worked there for another 8 years in sales before I jumped into a terminal manager role at a medium-sized carrier here in Edmonton. And in that role, that's where I really excelled, because I was able to use my my management, and I was able to use my driving and my communication to really help new drivers excel. And as the manager, I was responsible for not only training and mentoring, but it was also discipline. It was also maintenance. Like I was a one-man show in that office, so I spent as much time driving a truck as I did driving a computer. So yeah, I spent a lot of time. It was fun. I really enjoyed that job. And when that came to a head, then I ended up here at AMTA, and just over 6 years now. So I've been able to use that. Well, how old am I now? Oh boy, that 37 years experience to help others, and I love this job. It's what I get to do.
And we love working with you. And you did touch on some really important points there, especially about training and mentorship, that for our listeners out there, we're going to delve more into that in just a bit. Doug Walton, welcome back. Please tell us about your driving experience and what led you to us at AMTA here today.
Well, I was in protective services at the hospital. I was working in a role that I really didn't truly love, and I had a friend of mine that got into trucking, and he reached out and said, "Yeah, geez, Doug, I'm driving all over the place on my own boss. I'm making great money, and at that time, it was considerable amount money more than I was making at the hospital, and I had a young family. So, geez, I'll venture off and I'll give this a try. And I really, really loved it. I spent, just under 4 years in the truck running team service, groceries to northern BC and Yukon, and yeah, I just really enjoyed it. And then I actually had a sciatic issue, a medical issue that took me out of the truck driving. I just couldn't get past the pain of sitting in the truck for as long as I was, and I'd take a little bit of a break, and I was offered a supervisor role at a smaller carrier, who I was actually hauling for at the time, and so I took that role, and it was a very short time after that the company actually folded doors. And we had a sheriff come in and seize all of our equipment, unbeknownst to me and obviously the team that I was working with. So we're all left standing with no trucks, no equipment, and a customer to service. So overnight, I was offered a role with another company to take over that business as a branch manager, and I started in the office in about 2000, and 25 years later, I'm blessed to be here at the AMTA. So to share a lot of the knowledge and the expertise that I've learned over the years in this industry. It's an industry that's provided my family and I a great life, and one that I will always love to give back to. So I think I'm in a perfect role to be able to do that here at the AMTA. So.
Awesome. Thank you, Doug. Now, to dive into things, Kalina, I'm going to start with you from a carrier perspective. How important is it for a carrier to have a safe and empowering culture that supports professional drivers to be just that, safe and professional?
It's critical, in my opinion. There's no such thing as just a driver. Drivers keep our world moving. They keep us all in business, and engaging, supporting, involving, and empowering drivers is vital to a sustainable business in this industry. Seek the knowledge of your drivers, utilize their experience. Learning never stops, and remember that you have experts within your reach. They're at your fingertips.
And speaking of that experience piece that you just touched on, how important is training and ongoing mentorship for drivers?
As I said before, learning never stops. Drivers of 30 years can still learn and can still be taught. Regulations change, policies change. Keep your drivers well informed of the changes, connect with them so that they can align with the core values of your business.
Awesome. And as our listeners well know, there is a driver shortage across North America. And a challenge that we don't often hear about is covering the cost of driver turnover. Can you break that down a little bit for us from the carrier's perspective?
Driver turnover is definitely one of the highest costs to a transportation company. Just to hire a driver alone can be anywhere from $7,000 to $10,000.
Oh.
So to put that into perspective, if you're hiring 2 drivers a month at between 7 to 10K, that's $204,000 a year just to hire a driver. So and turnover also impacts morale, culture, and the bottom line of a company.
And kind of staying with that topic, what are some reasons in your experience that a driver might choose to leave a carrier?
One of the biggest ones I've seen in my experience is the inability to meet the work-life balance needs of a driver, expectations not being met for pay, poor culture, and poorly maintained equipment.
And would you say, given your time in industry, have you noticed a shift in that at all through the years?
I think the work-life balance needs have shifted in the last 5 to 10 years. It wasn't so predominant previously, and now you have a new demand from a new workforce age that want to be home more. They really do. So meeting the work-life balance now is more critical than before.
Amazing. Thank you, Kalina. I'm going to move to the driver side of things with Cliff and Doug. Cliff, I'm going to start with you, but Doug, I would love to hear your thoughts after. Why do you think some commercial drivers say, I'm just a truck driver?
I'm just a truck driver. Well, in my experience as a driver and as a driver trainer, I've seen how a lot of truck drivers get treated, and I can see why some truck drivers, after they get beat down long enough, will just say, "I'm just a truck driver." A lot of that has to do with management of that trucking company as well. I know. I'll use an example of there was one shipper receiver here in Edmonton that was extremely unprofessional with all my drivers, to the point where they were wanting to quit. So I actually went to that shipper receiver and asked him to say if he had a problem with any of my drivers, you can come to me and you can yell at me. I get paid to deal with these problems. You can't yell at my drivers because they're just doing a job. And we ended up losing that customer actually because of what I did. And when I told the owner of the company that, he agreed with me. He goes, "We didn't want customers like that in the first place." So as a driver, you really feel heard and listened when you go to when you go to your manager or your supervisor to say something, and they actually follow up with it. Um, Something also, just a truck driver. It's kind of a society attached label, really, if you think about it. So, I mean, when I got into it in the early '90s, I mean, I remember in the '80s watching all the movies as a kid, and it was the sexiest thing in the world to be a truck driver. What was it, Convoy? The movie Convoy. Oh, man, I wanted to be a rubber ducky,
Mine was Over the
right?
Top with Sly Stallone, so we're gonna.
There you go. Right. And my dad had to watch it with me, right? It was the two of us watching this
Mhm.
movie together. And man, did I want to be a truck driver when I was a young kid. Be careful what you wish for. But it was when I finally got into it, it wasn't near as glamorous as
Mm.
it was back in the '70s and '80s. So society, and there was a stigma around a truck driver that it's perceived as an entry level occupation, or just something to do until you find out what the heck you want to do. When in fact it's far from it. It's actually
Mhm.
it is a skilled occupation. It's not recognized right now, fingers crossed, but it there's so much education and so much you need to know as a professional commercial truck driver that the general public does not understand, that if they knew, they wouldn't be labeled as just a truck driver.
You make some really awesome points there, and I'm gonna steal some of your time here, Doug. I don't come from an industry background like the majority of you guys on the call today. Um, my knowledge of truck drivers growing up was you do this and they honk for you and you're besties. And that
That's my
that was
favorite.
kind of it, right? That's where it ended. And then I came to work here and you realize, like you mentioned, Cliff, it is so much more. The skill that it takes that we see with our professional truck driving championship, the people I've met, the knowledge that they hold, it's just amazing. So for our listeners, I know the majority of you are industry related. For those who aren't, we're super stoked that you're listening today. Drivers do so much to make sure that we get all the goods that we need on the daily. So let's just shout out to all the drivers behind the wheel today. Now, Doug, kind of same question. Why do you think the same of the I'm just a truck driver?
Well, I agree with a lot of what Cliff had to say. It's as a result, I think, because it's not a profession. It wasn't a professionalized or a skilled trade, or recognized that way. Like Cliff's mentioned, it was just one of those things that well, my dad did it, so I'm doing it. But
Mhm.
there was still a level of pride that came with being a truck driver. You didn't climb to the mountain and shout why you were so proud to do it. You just did it, and you're you were thanked by those vehicles that pulled up beside you and the kids in the
Mhm.
back seat giving you the honk, and how the parents trusted, that they're following you through a snowstorm, that you're going to get them there safe. And the more that we see challenges out on the roads, the increased traffic, there's a lot to be a truck driver. There's a lot it takes to be a truck driver. The skills, you're not just driving a car. You are driving, in some cases, 53 feet of trailer, sometimes two 53-foot trailers, right? So the skill just continues to increase as we get through the technology that the drivers need to know. Kalina talked a lot about it, teaching, the older drivers, or the old dog's new tricks kind of thing. There's a lot to be taught out there, even for new people coming in, not just the old dogs, but the new people, about technology and in-cab, and how to navigate snowstorms and chain up areas and steep grades, and with all that weight behind you, and just being those road knights and those professionals, and trying to change that, I guess, the view of the public. We know that there's a bit of a dirty underbelly to our industry, and it's kind of gotten worse over the years. So I applaud the government of Alberta for the new program that they got coming through to try to professionalize this industry and make it a skilled trade, and hopefully a Red Seal designation, because that's what it deserves. It's no different. The skill set that you need is no different than, just as important as a plumber or a welder or a trade, those kind of trade. There's a lot of things that, from equipment to the legislation that continues to change, to where am I going? How do I get there safely? Lots to navigate as a driver, and you have a big responsibility. And equipment, you're operating upwards of $500,000 or more, not even including, the cost of the freight that you're, so when you look at the responsibility of a driver, the costs associated with just the equipment and the product that they're hauling, there's a lot of responsibility there to be hanging onto a steering wheel and navigating through what they have to navigate daily. So I think it's not anyone can do it, and that's what I think the public needs to understand. You need to have that training, and when you don't, we see what happens when people have skirted the training, or somehow cheated their way into becoming a Class 1 driver. It shows very, very quickly that they don't have the skills that it takes.
Thank you so much, Doug. You touched on a lot of important points there. I want to focus on, you had mentioned drivers, for example, during a snowstorm. They will follow a commercial truck. They know they have a professional driver in front of them. They're big. They're kind of paving the way. I know for myself, if I need to be traveling, and for example, if it's foggy, I've got myself stuck to the back of a truck driver, following safely, of course. But I think a lot, and maybe not enough, of the motoring public knows the efforts that commercial drivers go to. It does lead to one initiative that we have here at AMTA, the Angels of the Highway. That is, if you are a carrier or a driver who has gone above and beyond, it can be as extreme as you've helped out with a collision, and it can be something as simple as you stopped by, bought someone lunch, or you rescued a kitten from a tree. Like, it does not need to be major things. It's just different ways that drivers are out there and doing good things for people, because we all know how much they do. So if you want to know more about that Angels of the Highway, we're going to have that in the show notes for you. Okay, now, Doug, I am going to stay with you for the next one. Can you tell me some of the key factors that drivers have in staying with a carrier long term?
I think, in my experience, when the driver feels valued, part of a team, when they come home from the trip, he or she, spent the whole week away, that they come home to an employer that has an open door policy. That person can go and see their manager, talk to them about their week, talk to them about their challenges, their successes, feel that they've been heard, and that they're supported, right? And that's how I've always managed. That's how, when I was driving, I really appreciated when I got back to the office that the dispatcher would engage and say, how was your trip? Anything going on? Any problems? What do you need? Right? And you feel that you're, again, then part of that team and not just the driver, right? And that's really where the companies that value their drivers, that they understand that it's not about the equipment that's up against the fence, because if there's no driver to drive it, then it doesn't matter, how good that equipment is. So it's really about understanding how you need to support your drivers, make sure that they're trained, make sure they're comfortable, and they know. Kalina mentioned again, that it's ever changing, the rules in our industry. There's changes here and changes there. So we need to make sure that when the drivers are rolling through the scale, they're coming up to that light and they're staring at that light, that they're comfortable, that they can wave at the officer and invite an inspection if they can get one, because they're comfortable and they've done their pre-trips, they've been trained how to do it all properly, they know that their paperwork's in correct order. If it's dangerous goods, they know they got the right placards on, so that they're not white knuckling that steering wheel, staring at that light, hoping it doesn't turn red, and feeling that anxiety. That's a true tell for me that driver hasn't had the right training, or that company's safety culture maybe isn't up to where it should be. So, again, in that to speak about turnover as a driver, when you're working for companies that don't make you feel that you're part of the team or supported, that pay agreement that you had is not honored, and you're not treated well, and it's a quick way to have those turnover costs within your business, because no driver is going to stay unless they feel valued, right?
So in that, Doug, you touched on training, and Cliff, in your intro, you also touched on the importance of training and mentorship. Let's delve on that some more. So Cliff, not just from a driving perspective, but even from a professional perspective approaching the job, how important is training?
Oh boy, it's proper training is probably the same, or if not more important than learning just the actual operation of the truck itself. Every driving job has its idiosyncrasies, whether it be hauling fuel, hauling general freight, hauling groceries, hauling pipe, whatever. There's always something different, and there's different scenarios. Without the proper mentorship, without the proper training, you are without a doubt setting that driver up for failure. If you just hand him the key, say, here's your load of pipe, go to Fort Mac, you are setting yourself up for failure, because there's no load securement training. There's probably doesn't have a headache rack, which that's a bad thing in the end. Then there's the mentorship side. This is actually near and dear to my heart. When I first started at AMTA, I was trying to get as many people involved to create a mentorship program. I remember before Josh Hannaberry came on board, he was working at CN. And so I had Josh all excited about it. I had buy-in from OH&S, I had buy-in from WCB, I had buy-in from enforcement. And then the Alberta government goes in and decides that they're going to do it too. But it was my idea at first, just saying, putting it out there. No, it's mentorship is such an important thing that obviously people in high places in government have noticed it. So they're making it mandatory now to get your class 1. So it's an amazing thing, and I believe they're going the right direction with it for sure.
And Doug, can you touch on the importance of that mentorship piece as well?
Yeah, I think it's mentorship is not just a nice to have. It's an essential thing. Much like a strong safety culture, our industry deals with, like I said, ever-changing regulation, technology, and road conditions. So ongoing training keeps the drivers confident, right? And when you have a mentor, and when I look back at my career and the person who I called my mentor, I ran team with that person, and never drove a truck through a mountain, never drove a truck through the mountain areas and through snowstorms or anything like that. So I was very, very nervous, but that having that person beside me, calming me down, saying, you're doing all the right things here. Let's try this. This is how you shift the gear. This is how you challenge a hill with some ice on it, and this is how you chain up. This is how, all those things made me feel more confident and comfortable in the role. So without that, and I've as an office, working in the office and dispatching, I've made the mistake, because I was out of all options, and said, okay, well, here's a load, you got to go, and good luck, and didn't explain things well, and it blew up on me huge. And I don't ever want to put anyone else into that situation again, especially that driver. I felt bad. That driver came to work for me, and I said, sorry, I don't have much time to tell you how to do this or whatever. in hindsight, I should have went with him and showed him how to do it the right way. That driver came back, a mess. He was upset. He probably didn't want to work for me anymore, and it was because I was in a pickle and I needed someone quick, and I cut corners, and it's when you do that, that's the result. So when you spend time, and that means different. That time frame is different for everybody. Sometimes a week is enough. Sometimes it takes 5 weeks. But at the end of the day, when you invest that time and that driver at the end of it says, geez, I'm a much more confident driver now because that company invested, that mentorship or that pro driver trainer that to come with me and show me the ropes. That's really where that retention comes in. And also it improves your overall bottom line, right? Because one of those line items is claims and accidents, and not mentoring new drivers impacts that line item on your P&L significantly. The cost of turnover, very few people realize that how much that impacts the bottom line as well. So you got to do everything in your arsenal to keep that driver happy, but also trained and well aware of what they need to be doing daily.
Let's stay with that for a minute, Doug. And what are some no-goes for drivers when it comes to potential carriers?
I think it starts right at the recruiting level, right? So when you're hiring someone to come into your facility and do a job, and I've been sold, a bunch of goods that really it turned out to be something totally different, and I think that's where it really starts. Is if you're selling a job on the pay or the schedule or the type of equipment the person's going to be, driving. Hey, it's a brand new truck, and then they show up and it's 20 years old and 400 people have gone through it, and again, start right at the beginning, painting that picture that's going to be the picture that they see when they come in and start the job. Don't paint a picture and then give them something else day two, and then again, the training and the mentorship is one thing, but having that open door policy again, making sure that you give time for your drivers to share with you what's working and what isn't, and listen and take action immediately. Don't, even down to payroll, right? I don't know how many times I've worked for a company that says, oh, well, yeah, we messed up on that driver's pay. We'll catch you next time, and no, that driver's worked. He's earned that money. He has the right, she has the right to have that money. So don't wait another 2 weeks or the next month payroll, whatever the cycle is. Correct it now, right? And just be very reactive, but also proactive in going back to that mentorship and training. Make sure that when they're going out on day one, they're comfortable with doing the job. Because if they're not and they make a mistake, they're going to feel worse than you are, and they may not stay as a result. So, but yeah, just again, being straightforward and honest with the role. If it's a job where you're hand bombing groceries in the middle of nowhere and it sucks and it's going to be cold in the winter, spell it all out, and if it's a fit, then great. If not, then hey. But also, to Kalina's point earlier, our drivers today are different than they were 10 or 15, 20 years ago. They are more engaged with family, although they want to be. They're taking on more of a role as dad or mom. They need to be home, and so we need to be flexible with shifts as well. Things could change in someone's household where that I can no longer be a long haul driver. Things have changed. I need to be home for my family. Is there something in the city that I can do, right? You need to be flexible, because if you're not, that person needs to go, and find something else. But if you do work at it and you try hard to make a schedule fit and you just can't, but you've shown the effort, that person may still leave. However, it'll always be in the back of the head that, that company tried their best, and if my situation's changed, maybe, I really liked it back there, right? So maybe I'll come back. And then you're having a driver come back to you that really is 80% of the way trained already. They know you, they know your business. So yeah, just being flexible is another key thing.
Awesome. Thank you for that perspective, Doug. Cliff, is there anything on your end from a go, no go when it comes to choosing a carrier?
Yeah, I think it has, all the way, it's got to come from the top. What I mean by that is right from the owner to the senior management, they have to have buy-in as well as the drivers. So they're walking the talk, talking the walk. How do you, whatever
Walking
it
the
is,
talk, you nailed it.
walking the talk. Yep. What I mean by that is, I remember my very first carrier that I ever worked for. The owner of the company would not allow drivers into the office area, and they weren't allowed in his office. And I thought that was quite disrespectful. And as a young driver, what was I? I was 22 at the time. I just thought that that's the way it was. Well, no, that's not the way it is. And fortunately, his son was the one that I reported to. So he was a good guy. And but I think now, knowing what I know now and having the experience I know now, I don't think I would have been able to put up with with an owner that was like that and disrespected drivers in that way. But there's one thing I want to say when it comes to retaining drivers and keeping drivers. It's letting the drivers know when they've done something good. If they've done something, you need to let them know. I'm going to use an example. And I still remember this. I'm closer to 60 than I'm 50 now. And I was 24 years old when this happened, and I remember it to this day. My truck had broken down, and after my shift, and so I'm at the front of the building waiting for my dad to pick me up. And it was snowing, and so I was bored, so I shoveled the sidewalks. So my dad shows up, I get in the truck, and a month later we're in a staff meeting, and they stopped the staff meeting and thanked me for shoveling the sidewalks and gave me this $10 gift card. And back then, $10 was a lot of money. Not that old. I can't remember where, but yeah, it was. It's recognition when you're doing a good job. It's such an important thing as an employee, not just a truck driver. But I mean, truck drivers don't get thanks enough. Aside from Driver Appreciation Week, they need it.
And I think it's just human nature, right? To be appreciated and seen for what you do in the workplace, whether you're a commercial driver or I don't know, postal worker. Let's just throw that out there.
Right.
I think that's a huge piece.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say, like, the programs, like the Driver of the Month programs, whether it's through the AMTA, which is a great program, or if carriers have those kind of programs in-house, it's important to have some form of recognition when people are doing things right. It's easy to get caught in that trap of, it's always a disciplinary discussion, oh, you did this wrong or you did that wrong, and it really becomes one-sided, and it really can quickly deflate the driver and really not want, make them not want to work for you anymore. So as much as, yes, sometimes there's a call for disciplinary actions, and sometimes you got to have those difficult discussions, but most importantly, try to find those ways to celebrate the driver. And it's not hard to find. You just have to be out and be engaging, and guarantee you that if you're out and you're listening and paying attention to what your drivers are doing every day, there's someone out there going over and above for you. Yep. As your driver, and whether that's how they present themselves at the customer level, or just how they support peers within the company. Just all you got to do is open your eyes. There's lots of great things going on out there.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Thank you, Doug. And for our listeners, we will include details on AMTA's Driver of the Month in the show notes, should you have a driver who goes above and beyond. I know from Kalina's perspective, Triline has had a bunch through the years in my time here. So it's a really great program, and just one little thing to help recognize those drivers who do go above and beyond. I'm going to start winding things down. I just want to thank you all so much for being here and sharing your knowledge and insights today. Let's do a little anything to add. And I'm going to start with you, Kalina. Is there anything you would like to wrap up with?
A lot of good points were brought up today about recognition and just taking the time to thank your drivers. Following up with them is critical. Listening to them, I know there's a point where you have to substantiate data that's coming in and statements and maintenance requests, but listen to your drivers. Things that were brought up in my experience, for example, calling maintenance requests cry sheets. We did that for decades. Why is it called a cry sheet?
I love your train of thought, by the way. I
That's
never
a
would have thought of that.
Great point. Great point.
Right?
That's painting an incorrect picture and already defeating the purpose. It should be called a maintenance form. And one of our top drivers brought that up. Hey, why is this called a cry sheet? It's disrespectful. If you think about it, it's just things like that, really listening, but making sure, most importantly, that you follow up. Follow up with your drivers when they request something substantiated, of course. Investigations, if they were involved in something, let them know the outcome. When's the last time you were in your yard and you shook the hand of one of your drivers coming in or going out? Hey, thank you for your service. Years of service awards. Giving them a voice. And just remembering that day to day, the sacrifices that they make to haul your loads. And equipping them with knowledge and support helps them make better decisions. Think of their physical and mental well-being that they have to put front and center while they're driving. When you're driving, you have a lot of time to think. How are you going to stay physically, mentally active and fit? So they're faced with a lot. And I think at this point in my career with TFI, I'm known as the feather ruffler for good reasons, and probably the loudest driver advocate within the organization. And you probably won't meet anyone who's got more respect for drivers than me. So I will continue to be their voice.
I love that. And I think it's so crucial, the Kalinas of the world who do speak up for the drivers and make sure that their needs are being met, both physical and mental. Mr. Litke, is there anything you would like to add as we wrap up?
Everybody had such great points, and I just want to kind of touch on one that Kalina made early on when she was talking about the cost of hiring a new driver. I think you said it was $7,000 per driver, and if you're hiring 2 drivers a month at $7,000 a month, that's just under $170,000. If you can minus that by 1 driver, you're going to save yourself $68,000. So if you could invest that money back into the drivers, into the a benefit package or something for the drivers to retain them, you're going to, and in the long run, you are literally saving yourself a whole lot of money, a whole lot of time, and a whole lot of headache. And all you're doing is retaining your drivers and just treating them properly.
And if I could add quick on that, just as humans, we all make better decisions when we're feeling good about what we're doing, we're empowered, we're positive, and we're physically and mentally fit to take on a task. We make better decisions. So it's critical. And just being celebrated and feeling important is part of that.
Absolutely. And finally, Doug, anything you'd like to add?
I just want to thank, obviously, Cliff and Kalina for their comments, and I 100% agree with everything that's been said. You know, I've always said this, that being a truck driver is probably one of the hardest jobs on the planet. And people don't realize, you know, when you talk about the lack of sleep, the toll it takes on your body, you know, we know that as a, industry, and it's proven that, commercial drivers can take 16 years off the average lifespan, just because of the health issues that come with this profession. So to Kalina's point, health and wellness is something that we didn't really pay much attention to. It was just like, oh, okay, well, if you need an extra day, take an extra day's sleep, but we need you back here. You need to get going. So it's time we need to slow that roll, and we need to pay more attention to how, the health and the wellness and the, some people call it first aid, mental first aid, and those kind of things, how we can support our drivers better to be healthier. We know that focusing on health and wellness for ourselves, the people that are working in the office, is important. But we get to come home every day. We get to sleep in our own bed. I get a lunch hour. I can go out for a walk, and then I can maybe cook a meal at home and bring it with me. That's not always the case for our people on the road, right? They could experience delays, and they're having to go to fast food restaurants versus having a home cooked meal. If they got stuff going on at home, they're driving away from it every single time. That you're staring out of the windshield of that. I know I've said this before, but you're staring out of that windshield, traveling away from all the things that you feel that you got to turn around and fix. It's not an easy job to leave your family every week, to be gone and not be sleeping, with your significant other in your home bed every night. And then, to Cliff's point, protect your drivers, stand behind them. Don't let people treat them as though that they're not seen, they're not valued, or they need to be treated as, professionals. They need to be looked at as they're supplying a critical, service to us as humans. Like, our society would crumble very quickly. And I know I read an article where someone kind of just laid out a timeline of how quickly society would fall apart if we had no drivers. I encourage people to read that. It's kind of doom and gloom, but it really paints the true picture of where we'd be without our drivers. So they need to be on that pedestal. That's where they belong, and supported, trained, and mentored, and however, all the things that we talked about today. We don't have people coming out of school going, I want to be truck drivers. And that's a scary thing. We have an aging workforce. When I was going through the training, it was, well, my dad was a driver, and it's just something I did. I followed his footsteps. My grandfather, same thing. Nowadays, that's not the case. We have people that have never operated equipment. We have people that are coming from other countries that don't know our road systems, don't know our weather systems, that need all that extra training to be effective and safe on the road. So we just need to make sure that we got those programs, and we got, talk to those senior drivers within your company as well, get their buy-in, and try to get as many mentorship opportunities from those groups as well, to support the growth of the drivers. Because if we don't, we're going to be in a big problem, shortage.
And I mean, in that same vein, I know AMTA has a few programs and initiatives coming up to help get those butts in seats. And I know with help from carriers like Kalina and the other folks that we're definitely working towards some solutions. So hope to see some ground there. I do want to thank the three of you so much. I'm so glad that industry has folks like the three of you to advocate for drivers in the ways that you do. I also want to take an opportunity to shout out Jim Tench and Henry Wolf for your work on our regional meeting on September 10th. Speaking to the same subject, you guys crushed it. So shout out to you wherever you are. And now we will go to some AMTA news. The Sherwood Park Safety Summit takes place October 22nd. Registration remains open, and we look forward to seeing you there. And it is hard to believe, but winter is upon us. Starting in November, registration will open for AMTA's 88th annual conference. This year's conference returns to the Grey Eagle Event Center April 22nd to 23rd. And as mentioned, details below on AMTA's Angels of the Highway and Driver of the Month programs. As always, stay safe and see you next time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of AMTA's Steering Change Podcast. The views expressed by guests of the Steering Change Podcast are their own and may not reflect the views of AMTA, its hosts, or sponsors. Did you have a question that you would like answered on an upcoming episode of the Steering Change Podcast? We want to hear from you. To submit a question to the Steering Change mailbag, hit up our DMs on LinkedIn, Facebook, or Instagram with the hashtag Steering Change and your question will be answered either live on the podcast or by one of our SMEs here at AMTA. We ask that you share this episode with those in your network that could benefit from what we discussed today, and make sure to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast platform so you can be notified when future episodes are released. You can learn more about us and our mission by visiting www.amta.ca. Now get out there and have a safe day.